I love when I fail. I love when I go through something and we try something and then it didn't work, because then I know that that's something that I've learned. I'm not going to do that, make the mistake again. And it's not even necessarily a mistake, but I love when something doesn't work, because then it gives me something else to do.
So you have a passion for fitness and the desire to start your own business, but launching a massively successful fitness business is extremely complex. The systems, operations, hiring, firing, coaching, sales, and marketing are critical to success. Where do you even start? This show will give you the answers. Here is Bedros Keuilian and Bryce Henson, your hosts of the Fitness Franchise Podcast, a show dedicated to helping fitness entrepreneurs launch and grow successful gyms.
Today's episode is another incredible one. In fact, our guest is a dear friend of mine for nearly a decade, and he has an impressive rap sheet, so here we go. He was part of the original team that took Fit Body Bootcamp from a licensing program to a franchise system, and in his original role was that of a business coach for the entire franchise. And in doing so, he helped over 150 locations open their locations successfully. Now that role developed into running the Fit Body Bootcamp Mastermind coaching program and a university training for new franchisees. Then in 2015, he decided to open Double Win Consulting to provide marketing services and coaching to both local and online businesses across the world. Now, with his small team, he has successfully helped over 200 businesses grow and scale to give owner-operators more freedom. And in looking at the results, Double Win has generated over 150,000 paid leads for their clients on over a $3 million ad spend. Fernando Bonato, welcome to the show, my friend.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Always a pleasure talking to you, Chris.
You are certainly welcome. Man, I'm excited for this. You're such a good guy, a close friend, and I would say one of the smartest guys I know, so there's going to be a lot to learn today. Before we get to the nuts and bolts, I want to hear your backstory, and we have something in common. You're originally from Brazil. You have this awesome story, so kind of give us a little bit of the origin story from, you growing up in Brazil, moving to the U.S. and all that.
Yeah, I'm only 41, and there's a lot to talk about. I've been through quite a lot. I don't have the sad story that a lot of people have. I've never really, I would say, struggled. But when I tell my story to people, it's like, oh man, that must have been rough. I'm like, yeah, it was rough, but it wasn't anything out of the world. It was just a lot, it was very adventurous and very exciting. So when I was 16, I started dating my wife, that we're still together today, as you know. This year, we're going to be together for 25 years. So that's something that I'm really proud of, that we made it through life together, basically. We grew up together. And part of that was we were dating for a few years, and I was doing computer science in Federal University in Brazil. It was very prestigious, very hard to get into. And after a couple of years, I decided that that's not what I wanted. Aline saw an ad in the newspaper saying, hey, internship to the U.S. To go work in your area, right? So if you're going to school, you could join an internship program in other countries. It wasn't in the U.S., in other countries. So I decided, let's do that. Let's see what that takes us. And I contacted this company. And the funny thing is, I don't know if I've ever told you that, is that I wasn't really interested in the U.S. As you know, I come from an island in Brazil. It's like beach scene. And I was like, maybe we should go to Australia. So I contacted this company and said, hey, if it could be in Australia, that'd be pretty cool. But that was in 2000. That was in the middle of the .com boom. And the only thing that they could find for me was in the U.S. So after a few months of trying, I was like, okay, let's go to the U.S. then. And that's where the whole thing started, right? So I hit the ground running in the U.S. working for a few .coms that they all went under. Unfortunately, I wasn't lucky enough to be part of one that survived. And then after that, I decided to stay and to live the American dream. And that's the grinding that you expect from immigrants. So I worked at pizza places. I worked at making sandwiches. When my son was born, I tell this story to everybody. They can't believe it. And I don't think I could do it today, but out of a work week, imagine that 7 days, 3 shifts per week, you have 21 shifts for the week, right? I was working 20 of the 21. when my son was born.
Oh, wow.
Because we've decided that my wife was just going to take care of my son. She wasn't working. So I'm like, okay, I'll work double, triple, whatever I needed. At some point I had 5 jobs, and that's the beauty of the American capitalism, that you can get paid by the hour. You can just go in and work as much as you want. And that's what I did. So many different jobs. I ended up working for Peter Lik, which is arguably the most commercial, successful artist in the world. Like, his company these days are probably generating, I don't know, maybe over $100 million a year. And I was part of the growth of that team. He's an Australian photographer. And I started, again, as one of the jobs as cashier for his art gallery in San Francisco. That evolved into me running the company, or that gallery, and later on the company when he opened in Vegas. So I moved to Vegas, helped him go from 2 or 3 galleries in the US. I think when I left, we had 18, something like that. I'm really
about how old were you at this point?
I was in my early 20s at this point. I was like probably 24, 25.
Okay.
So one of the things that you're going to notice is that I'm very quick to learn things, and that probably comes from this engineering, computer science background. You're able to learn things really quickly and develop systems to make things better, right? So yeah, and then after that was done, with the team that I was part of with Peter Lik in Vegas, Tuan was one of them. You probably remember him, and Nelson.
Oh, yeah.
They were part of. They were, helping Bedros to, take Fit Body Bootcamp from a franchise, from a licensing program to a franchise, and they needed to hire someone to basically replace Bedros on the coaching of the clients and things like that. So they thought of me, and I decided to move back to California and join the team. And it was probably the best thing I've ever done. In terms of professional decisions, because I've learned so much. It was so good. It was by far the best job I've ever had when I was working for someone. So that's where it takes me to Fit Body. And I don't know if you want me to stop there, if you want to continue, or if you want to ask questions, but that's kind of like the short version of the whole thing. Oh, and the other funny thing is, I was still living in Vegas when I was interviewing for the job. So I was driving every other week to Chino Hills from Vegas. And my wife was pregnant with my daughter, Julia. And when I was in the interview, the final interview, talking to Bedros, and we decided, okay, when you're going to start, I get the phone call, and my wife's like, the water broke. It's like, drive back. So I think I might hold the record. I drove back and from Chino Hills to Vegas in like 3 hours something. And I was like, if the police stops me, like, my daughter's getting born. So I have an excuse. So everything went well, packed up the stuff again, moved back to California, and then you take it from there, I guess. Like, that's where you joined the scene.
That is so right. Well, I love that backstory. We have something in common, well, quite a few things in common, but you talked about going to the Federal University in Brazil. I actually went to that same school too. However, the caveat is I didn't formally enroll in the school. I just went to the department for Portuguese for foreigners when I moved there. I lived in the same island that you're from for 2 years, and from 2010, 2012. And so when I tell people I went to UFSC, which stands for Universidade Federal Santa Catarina, everyone looks at me like I'm the smartest guy ever. But little they know, and then I had to clarify that actually it was just in the language for foreigners department. Right. But that's a credit to you for going to that school. And my actually brother-in-law also goes to that school, and went to that school, just very, very sharp. But that all said, kind of going back to Fit Body and kind of how we started, you were actually my first franchise business coach, which is just awesome. And I give you so much acknowledgement and credit, because when I first started, this was back in 2012. And at that point, you'd been with Fit Body for, I think, a year or two. I'm just, white-eyed, bushy-tailed, like green as all heck, and not knowing anything. And you basically kind of, guided me through the process, and obviously still work together to this day. So that's a really kind of cool segue and a nice little kind of bow on it. But that all said, kind of walk me through what that experience was like, kind of, changing, or I guess transitioning from Fit Body from a licensing to a franchise system. And then kind of what was your role? Like, you obviously were a coach. What were the things that you really learned and got value from? And what was the biggest challenge that you saw like in that experience for, I think, the 1.5 or 2 years when you're in that role?
Well, we had a lot of challenges, and I was lucky enough to have a boss because Bader's was really good at, and I still don't know how he does it, because he's able to trust people and just give them responsibilities. And every time Bader's gave me a responsibility, I felt like this is way too much. I can't handle this. But he was good enough to let me know. It's like, no, you got this, and if you don't get it right, that's fine. We fix it, right? Mm-hmm. So I would have personally many challenges because I was being giving all these responsibilities that I thought at the time it was too much, but they weren't, because he knew that I could handle them, right? So my task was to, once a franchisee had purchased the franchise, was to guide them through the entire process of planning and opening a facility, from leasing the location, hiring staff, learning about the numbers, learning about the KPIs, learning about sales, figuring out like construction timeline for opening, and then obviously I was available pretty much 8 hours a day to have coaching calls with all these people, the people that were already owners. So we have this many different buckets of people, right? They have people that were still licensees transitioning into the franchise, people that were coming in brand new as the franchisees. So my job was to make sure that everybody was thriving and excited about being part of Fit Body Bootcamp and giving them as much knowledge as possible, which was incredible, because I was talking on the phone every day with people that had already, back then, I talk to my clients today. Back then, like a tough threshold to surpass, like the glass ceiling that people had, was to reach 100 clients. And these days, we open these facilities with 100 clients, right? So I can see how much the whole business and industry evolved. But yeah, it was incredibly challenging, because I had to, challenge myself to talk to people. I've never done it before. And to try to gather as much knowledge as possible to be able to give to people, to these owners, and to coach them, because coaching people is not an easy thing to do, right? You have people like you. I remember you're like extremely cautious. You're like, well, but what if this doesn't work? But what if that? Like, you're always like trying to make sure that, and coming from a corporate kind of like mindset and transitioning to an entrepreneurial mindset, it's probably one of the most difficult things there is to do, because when you have a job, like, you have all the securities and everything, but now all of a sudden, if you're the owner and if you're the boss, that's all responsibility falls on your shoulders. So you need to be able to bear that stuff and prepare for the worst.
Yeah, well, that you certainly did. And it's funny, as I kind of think back on our story, when I opened my first location in November 2012, you were there to kind of coach and guide me through that process. But I remember November 5th actually was a specific day that we opened. And right around your birthday's on Christmas, is it not?
Yeah, 25th.
Very, very memorable. But right around your birthday, which would be probably only 6-7 weeks after my facility launched, I just literally was kind of freaking out, scheduled an emergency, coaching call with you and Bedros. And, you talk about coaching is challenging because, dealing with emotions. And I know I was super excited, super ambitious to basically be successful. At the same token, though, you had to walk me off the ledge, and because the emotion was high. So I think that's, part of the coaching role that you mentioned. And again, I wanted to at least provide our audience a little insight to that experience, and obviously your knowledge and your skill set, that you were able to deliver not only to me, but just owners throughout the process that you help coach.
Yeah. And it's that thing, like I tell people, especially for the fitness industry, you're not running an emergency room, right? There are so many other businesses that are 10 times more difficult. I've worked at restaurants back in San Francisco, back when I was chasing the American dream. And I got to be an assistant manager to a restaurant. And talk about difficult, man, when you have like hundreds of items that can spoil next day. You have 30, 40 employees at a time that are calling in sick or not showing up or disappearing from the face of the earth, right? You have customers coming in every day that you don't know, and you're probably not going to see it again. So if you compare running a fitness business to any other business, it's fairly easy because any mistakes that you can make are easily, you can correct easily, right? Given that you're not making anything extremely stupid, which you have, that's what a franchise provides you. Like, he points you in the right direction, so you don't have to be afraid of making those super stupid mistakes. But anything else is piece of cake, right? It's just like managing your emotions and going through the process. But it's not like nobody's going to die if you mess up with a party or a particular sales event or whatever,
Yeah. Well, sometimes easier said than done, but you obviously have good perspective, and I just think you have good, factory installed DNA to be a great coach. And then specifically, you developed and kind of transitioning to a very, very talented marketer, which then you ended up opening your own consulting business in 2015. Before we get there, which I'm dying to kind of inquire so our audience can learn from you in that perspective, I do want to also highlight, you talk about Bedros and your work experience. You are featured in the book Man Up, and Bedros used a different name, but to this day, obviously you guys are friends and he still sings your praises. And basically in the story of Man Up, he changed your name, but basically he kind of articulates the fact that he worked with you and you were just such a high performer that, due to his ineffective leadership at the time, you were kind of the one, teammate that got away that really, could have been, a very, very high performer within the Fit Body franchise if his leadership skills would have been enough to kind of guide and guide you through that process. But I wanted to see if you have any insight there. And then, of course, I want to kind of transition to how you learned all the marketing skill set and then, why you ended up launching Double Win in 2015.
Yeah, I think obviously I'm flattered, and I give credit to Bedros for taking the blame. And that's what leaders do. Like anything goes wrong. It's like, it was my fault that he left. But maybe it wasn't all that, right? Maybe it wasn't, maybe it was a little bit part of that, but maybe it wasn't him. Maybe it was that the company wasn't big enough to have a space for me where I wanted to go. So I felt like my role as a coach has reached a point where I really couldn't grow beyond that. And I saw, you talk about the aha moments. I had this feeling that wasn't exactly where my heart was, because I was itching, and that's what probably a lot of your viewers have. It's like, at some point you're itching to have your own thing, because I've realized that when you're working for someone, there are a lot of wonderful things, a lot of amazing things that are part of that. But there's always this, I was itching to get fulfilled in this other place that I've never been before, which was like, I can handle this, right? I can probably do this on my own. And I had this vision. It's like, well, maybe I can do that. And that's actually another really interesting insight to bring out and to bring up another amazing person that I met through this process, which was Matt. One day we're running a mastermind, and I like to have a moment during the masterminds to talk about, drop the business part and see what people were feeling a little bit. And they turned the tables on me because I was asking people like, hey, where do you see yourself in 5 years? We're talking about our true passions and things like that. And there were people there that were just I'm here to make money. This is my business. It's not what I absolutely love to do. And they turned it on me. It's like, Fernando, where do you see yourself in 5 years? And I told him, like, I don't see myself here in 5 years, to be honest, guys. I don't see this going for much longer, even though I love what I'm doing right now. And then they pressed on me, and I don't remember if you were in that meeting or not, but they asked me, and I'm like, well, I would love to have something that I can be a little bit more mobile. I would like to spend some time in Hawaii. And after I left Fit Body, I was trying to figure out what I was going to do. I got a phone call from Matt. Right. And Matt Wilbur, you can probably, tell your viewers who he is. He's top owner of Fit Body Bootcamp right now, with the most locations, most successful by some measures. Right. So I was like, and Matt called me. He's like, hey, I will hire your services. Because he asked me, it's like, hey, what are you planning to do? Oh, I'm doing this and that. He goes like, I'm extremely grateful. I would like to hire your services. But here's the one deal that you need to do with me. I will only hire you if you move to Hawaii. So he made me move to Hawaii. I wasn't going to. I don't think nobody knows that.
No,
because
I didn't know that.
Like, oh, I'm doing this. If everything goes right, I'm going to move to Hawaii. But it was going to probably be one of those things that never going to happen. I was just going to put it off, and it was never going to happen. But Matt was the one that made me do probably the best thing that I've ever done. Sorry. which was move to Hawaii, and he forced me to it, and I can't thank him enough because of that, because I had that experience, right? So that's an interesting story.
Yeah, I had no idea. I mean, I obviously growing up in Florianopolis, which has 47 beaches, I figured you were just kind of going back to the island kind of DNA. But that's a great story. And again, I just want to acknowledge you again, both Matt and myself, vice presidents now of Fit Body Bootcamp. Obviously, Matt, most successful franchisee. He was actually being on this show. So his episode's out there in the ethers at some point. But pretty cool that both of us got our start with both vice presidents, with you, Fernando, being our coaches, and then obviously, hearing that cool story, how you shot off to Hawaii.
Yeah, really happy with that.
Cool. Well, I guess kind of transitioning to that, let's talk about Double Win. I didn't know that's how it got started, but tell the viewers just a little bit about the experience that you had, kind of what it was like to kind of launch that your company, and then, what kind of services that you offer, dying to hear more.
So what happened was towards the end because my job as a coach with Fit Body was to do whatever I could it wasn't really a written thing, but I would do whatever I could to make people, get more people, get more leads and grow. And I would get any resources I could gather to give these franchisees to achieve their results. Right. So that's when, and again, I'm really bad at dates, but that's when Facebook advertising started to work really well, because before then, when we started, I would teach people how to create flyers to send out in the mail. Right. That was marketing. That was all offline. There wasn't such a thing as an online marketing. So I was lucky that I was introduced. Bader was like, hey, there's this thing that we can do now. We can advertise on Facebook, and this is how we do it. So that's another thing that he did. It's like, Fernando, go ahead and learn this. So I was lucky enough to be exposed to that whole universe very, very early. So I started to do that for clients for Fit Body locations. And after I left, I was like, I can outsource the service, because the franchise is not doing it. And honestly, it's not the job of the franchise to market for individual locations. As part of each owner should do their own, right? So it's like, this could be a business that I could get into, and I could be like the SWAT team that comes in and takes care of that part of the equation. Because if you look at what a successful business is about, is obviously you need to have an amazing product. You need to rise above the rest of the people. But then beyond that, you need to, the marketing part is to letting your demographics, your audience know that you exist, right? This is what marketing is about. Letting you know that you're out there, putting good offers in front of them. And then down the funnel you go with sales and retention and all that good stuff, right? So I figure I could fulfill that part. And with the job experience that I had at being a coach, that's something that I don't even charge for, but it's something that I'm always available. For example, I usually have 4 or 5 coaching calls every day with my clients that we talk about anything that needs to be talked about to help them run their facility. So, but what my company does is we basically create a schedule, usually a quarter at a time, that is highly catered to you and your facility, because you own multiple locations. The markets are completely different, right? I don't care what anybody says that, do this and it's working great for me in Florida. Even for Matt, for example, he has 7 locations within the same city, Grand Rapids. We run the same thing for all 7. The results are wildly different, even going from one neighborhood to the other. There's so many things that can influence that. So what we do is we try to learn as much as we can about your competition, what's out there, and we try to put offers that are going to give you the best results for your marketing dollars. And we pride ourselves into basically beating anyone in that field there.
Yeah. Now, what type of businesses? I mean, obviously, you've been in the fitness industry. My locations work with you. Same with Matt and other fitness studios, inclusive Fit Body, or even outside our brand as well. But who is your typical client? Is it fitness? Is it other industries? Just curious, kind of get some insight there.
About I would say 80% of our clients right now are fitness. We've launched a couple of very successful Kickstarter products. For example, you referred me to a coffee machine. So we did that. We're working right now with a couple of companies we've done a couple of big retailers for DIY products. Actually, in California, like Sizzix. We're currently working with a company that has been approved to raise funds for like a launch. So we're going to be working on that financial space as well. So there isn't really an area that we are not going to go into, and because the formula is the same. For marketing online, you have all the tools out there. You just need to know how to adapt that. And that's actually, to bring up a really good point, something valuable for your listeners. If you have a brick and mortar business and you're out there on the internet trying to learn how to market, 90% of the advice out there is not going to apply to you, at least not directly. It's going to apply in concept. But everybody that's teaching ads and how to market, they're talking about you selling either a physical product that we can ship anywhere or an online product that anybody could be your client. Mm-hmm. For local businesses, brick and mortar, you are bound to an area that people can come and travel to your location. And what people don't realize is that that audience is the same all the time. There's very, very little change. So you can't screw it up. You can't overmarket, right? What a lot of people do is like, well, let's run this campaign's working, spend millions and millions, thousands of dollars, and all of a sudden your demographics is completely upset with you because you're flooding them with this annoying ad. So if you want longevity, if you want to be able to market for the long haul for your business for years to come, you need to pace yourself and you need to learn about your audience, because it's the same thing as, you moved into a neighborhood. You're not going to throw loud parties because your neighbors are going to hate you. You need to be a good neighbor and you need to be doing the right thing. So that's the main thing. If you want to learn to do your ads or your marketing by yourself, which I don't recommend because it's getting so complicated, but be mindful of the differences between what people are telling you to do and what in fact is your business. And that's the main thing that we do when we take on a new client. What's our audience? Oh, it's the entire US. Great. We can market in one way. But if you're only reaching to the same 20, 25,000 people all the time, and you don't spice it up your offers, you don't change your stuff, it's going to get old really quickly. And that's the number one thing that brings people back. I would say about 60-70% of our clients within a few years come back to me because they're like, oh, Fernando, I've tried this other agency and this other agency, and it worked great for a little bit, but then it stopped working altogether. It's just because they're milking it too much,
Yeah, so you're playing the long game here, and specific, obviously, to just kind of reiterating your point. Local marketing is, can be very different than, kind of online marketing across the country or world, for that matter. So, kind of more diving in on that point, you've seen, obviously, from a marketing perspective, you see things evolve over the last, handful of 10 years actually being in the industry plus. What's currently working now, and kind of what's that evolution that you've experienced with your agency look like over the last handful of years? I'm curious on the ebbs and flows and the strategy that you basically have implemented across the way, and then specifically what's working now.
Right. What's working now, it's what's working now for you. Like what people tell me is like, oh, this is working over there. Let's try over here. And I never say no, right? Sometimes a client comes with an idea. Oh, I heard it. This is working. I'm never going to say, oh, this is not going to work unless I've tried it before in your area. But usually what works is what works because, for example, I'm going to give you a very, very extreme example here. Lake Elsinore Fit Body Bootcamp, my good client, Caroline. We were running a campaign for her for 2 weeks. It was called Spring Slim Down. It's a really, really good offer. It was working everywhere else. It wasn't working for her. I mean, we were getting results, but it were a little bit under par, like a little So we had a call. We decided hey, what's the next thing it's going to do? She's going to run the challenge for Fit Body. And I decided, I had this hunch, one of these things, it's like, I'm gonna refresh the campaign, because I feel like things are turning in that specific area based on what she told me. I turn on the campaign again, and I have the stats here in front of me. We already have 12 sales within a matter of 72 hours, right? And now for the people out there that I'm talking paid leads, people that are paying to come in for a second. We're not talking leads of people that share their name, email, and phone number, which most marketers do that right now. I'm talking about people that have committed to $76 for a whole month to come in.
Mm-hmm.
So it turned, right? It wasn't working. So if you're not experienced, you're going to be like, oh, I tried this. I'm never going to try that again. Sometimes it's a matter of 48 hours of you retrying it, and then all of a sudden it hits because the conditions are better. So what's working is, and that's something that we do a lot. Like we do a lot of split testing. We do a lot of trials and errors. And okay, it worked over there. Let's try over here. Oh, it didn't work over here, but it's working over there. So it's the beauty of having an agency that I'm working with so many different people doing so many different things. The status of what's happening with marketing is, I see that in the beginning it was hard because very few people know how to do it or even know it existed. Then it became easy because there wasn't a lot of people involved, and Facebook and all these other platforms made it super easy for you to be like, oh, boost post, and you click here and everybody's doing it. Now it's becoming only the strong and the good will survive because it's becoming a professional thing, right? This new thing with Apple creating the constraints with the Pixel, you need to have a domain. Like gone are the days of you like running, click funnels and just putting something together really quick. Apple wants you to have a legit business that's confirmed with your domain thing. None of these things of installing multiple pixels and tracking people down and sharing with other companies, none of like that. So it's becoming really hard. Like I've had to change the way we bring clients on board because it takes a long time. It takes us a couple of days of hard work setting everything up to get everything together. So if you have a fitness business, or if you have any business, I highly recommend you to hire someone that knows what they're doing. The marketing dollars are going to come back. It's almost guaranteed for most locations. But don't try to do it yourself because it's gonna hurt your head a lot, and it changes daily. Right? Every time I log into Facebook, they change something on the interface, or they break something. So it's always a struggle.
Yeah, and that's the value, to your point, of just working and outsourcing like a professional. This is basically their focus. Actually, you brought up the Apple Facebook thing, and not to get too techie here, because I know most of our listeners, know the importance of it. But I do want to actually kind of pick your brain a little bit. Kind of give me your 30,000 foot view, just like explanation of actually what's going on currently with Apple and Facebook, and kind of what that looks like, and then kind of what's the outlook look like in terms of the potential challenges. And truth be told, I know of what's happening, but not to a granular level. So curious on your insights there.
Yeah, it has different facets. So the first thing is Apple controls if you think about the internet's split into three different groups, right? You have Facebook and Instagram in one side. People live in that sphere, or let's call it apps, right? Then you can put Snapchat and TikTok and all that stuff. You have that area. Yep. Then you have apps themselves, which Apple controls, because if you want to have an Apple and iPhone, most people have, like, you need to download the Apple and they control the App Store. And then you have Google out there. Google and Apple are really, really focused on organizing things. Facebook, not so much. So what happened now was Apple told Facebook that for apps to be able to track users, they're going to have to tell users that they're tracking them, what they're tracking them, and giving the user an option to opt out of that, right? So for most people, that's not a problem because we don't run apps. Like, we run traffic to a website, per se, right? So that's a problem for people that have apps and they're sneaking and tracking people behind the scenes without telling them. Here in Europe, for example, as you know, I'm in Portugal, the GRDP2 have been going on for a couple of years already. And every website, super annoying, every website has this thing, hey, we're tracking your cookies, accept or not. And then you accept and that it goes on, right? So that's one thing. So that doesn't really concern most people. The second thing that concerns most people, or some people, is if you're running traffic to a website, you can only have one registered pixel. Pixel is what tracks your thing, right? Per domain, and that pixel can only have 7 conversions attached to it, right? So for most people, that's fine. If you run a business, you have your own domain, you're going to have your ad account, you're going to connect all those things. And the tracking, the events that you can track are, page views, add to carts, registrations or purchases, and all those things. So you're probably not going to have to use more than 7. So for most people, they're fine. The problem is if you run like a super big domain with thousands and thousands of products, and you want to track all these things, and you have 2 different agencies working on your thing, and all of a sudden you have too many pixels going on. So I don't see that as a big disruption in anything that was going on for people opening, a business. So yeah, that's basically I think just people that just don't have to worry about. The only issue is that it became a lot harder to set it up correctly, right? So for example, we don't use the Facebook Pixel anymore for a long time. We use the Pixel, but we're using Google Tag Manager to install the Pixel in Google Analytics, right? So it gives you more granular approach. Same thing, we don't use ClickFunnels anymore. We created our own thing inside WordPress that gives us more tools to do. So we have basically professionalized the whole thing that most people are amateurs still. So I see a great opportunity for the future here for us.
Yeah. Well, that's just interesting. And if you're listening to this and marketing's not your forte, your probably head hurts. But I do think the value in it. And number one, I was just genuinely curious because there's been a lot of movement. So I really appreciate that, Fern. But then secondarily, I think just kind of goes to show that you really should be, partnering with an experienced, professional that can actually be ahead of the curve. Otherwise, as the platforms continue to develop, you're just going to kind of left behind. So I think that's huge value there. That all said, Fern, and kind of like putting a bow on it, I'm curious from your 2-part question, your personal perspective, but also to your agency's perspective, what would you say are your zones of genius? Like, why have you really achieved the success that you've had, both from a personal perspective and then also to just your company in general?
Well, I think that for the companies that I set out to do, I don't like to follow rules. I don't like to follow what people say tit for tat, because actually one of the things that I learned, and kind of like, people learn things differently, and I love to learn concepts, right? So if you look, for example, retention in business, and going back to the days of me running the mastermind, somebody comes in and says, well, our retention went up a lot because we started to do barbecues on Saturdays on things. And then you have somebody there writing it down and they start to do barbecues on Saturdays. But guess what? If you don't know how to throw a party and if your staff is not into throwing a barbecue, that's not going to work for you, right? So you need to understand concepts and then you apply to whatever it is that you're trying to do. So it's the same thing for the ads. People are like, oh my gosh, I'm running this ad and it's crushing. I'm getting clicks for less than $1. I'm like, okay, how much money did you spend? Oh, we spent already $1,000. How many clients did it bring? Well, we don't know. I know I'm paying the clicks are cheap, right? So you need to learn how to, it's way more difficult because you need to spend more time learning things for real in order to then wrap things up and have your own idea. So I think that's my zone of genius, I would say, is that I have this mind that's very creative. And actually, I'm going to give you a tip now that I learned. You talk about the aha moment. My aha moments that I found out about aha moments. But what you need to do is to learn concepts instead of trying to say, hey, this person told me to do that, and then you don't know why you're doing that. You don't know the ins and outs of why that is, and then you try to do something that comes out half-assed. Mm-hmm. Talking about the zone of genius, like I realized very recently, and I've been having this for my entire life, but something didn't click. I realized that I would have the best ideas in coming out of pickles out of usually in the shower, right? And a lot of people talk about that. It's like, wow, showers are great. So I came across something that, about alpha brainwaves. And there's 2 parts, like when you're deep in sleep or when you're getting into sleep or when you're in the shower, that you're awake, that your brain waves change to this alpha brain waves that you become like 10 times more creative. So now I'm taking 2 showers per day so I can have more moments. But what I had was, I don't know if it was Einstein, one of these big geniuses from the past, he used to try to fall asleep on a chair with a rock in his hand. So when he fell asleep, the rock would fall and he would wake up because he didn't want to fall asleep. He wanted to be in that almost falling asleep kind of zone. And that's where your brain waves are clicking better for better ideas and outside of the box ideas. So that's what I'm doing. I'm trying to find a book on the subject. If anybody knows, let me know. So I'm trying to hack my brain to have more of those times.
That's awesome. All right. Well, speaking of mindset and kind of how your brain works in your zone of genius, one other thing, even outside marketing, we can kind of bring it back if there's anything marketing specific you want to share, but something we haven't talked about a ton, but obviously just being friends for over the years and following each other on social media, we're both believers and followers of stoic philosophy. And I believe I actually was introduced through you, I think just through a posting of some of Ryan Holiday's work, The Obstacles Away, a few other, book recommendations. So I would just love to hear from your perspective of stoic philosophy, kind of the value that you've gained from it. Because for me, it's been really, really helpful, especially as navigating through 2020 with COVID, but just life in general. So can you articulate a little bit of your insights around stoic philosophy?
Yeah, well, I'm not a religious person at all. Regardless of that, I think that as humans, we're always looking for wisdom. We're always looking for, and I'm not a big fan of gurus and that kind of stuff because that fizzles out really quickly. So my journey started with what is the wisdom that's out there? And if you look at Buddhism and Stoicism, it's essentially the same thing. They were just discovered by very smart people back in distant past. As a matter of fact, I have here one of the books that I have on my table is the Meditations by Marcus Aurelius. Nice. And for being a guy that doesn't, that is not, I tend to be very logical. And some things are not logical about this world, but this helps you understand that. And some things are extremely hard to put it into practice. And I've been doing it for years now, and I'm getting better at it. But again, it's a continuation. It goes forever. If anybody, it goes against, for example, Stoicism tells you to always prepare for the worst. Always think of the worst, even worse, right? And when I tell this to a lot of people, they're like, "Oh, you're that's ridiculous. Like, why would you think of the worst?" So to prepare for the worst, because most likely the worst is not going to happen. So it's dangerous because you're always having negative thoughts. You're basically bringing negative thoughts to yourself because they're not. Oh, what if that happens? I wake up like, what if all my clients leave me tomorrow, right? That's the worst case scenario. It's never going to happen. But then it's like, well, if they do, that's what I'm going to do. So if ever happened, I'm never going to be caught with my pants down because I'm always preparing for a lot of negative things that have the potential of happening. And actually, that was first introduced to me, that concept in the 4-Hour Workweek book. That was the first book that I read that kind of started to get me well, there's more than life than working a 9 to 5. And there's a part in the book where Tim Ferriss talks about, being afraid of making a decision. And he went through this stoic philosophy. He was like, what is the worst that can happen? And then in the book is really funny because he talks about, I lose my job, I lose all my money, I have to move back in with my parents, and I'm going to be on a gutter with a dog licking my face. He's like, well, guess what? I can get a job bartending for a little bit, and I can build myself back up. So that's one of the things one of the virtues that Stoicism brings to you. And honestly, there's two things that are constant in my day. I always listen to a Rush album every single day of my life. I don't go to bed with that, before I listen to that. It just makes me a better person, makes me feel good.
What do you mean Rush album?
Huh?
What do you mean Rush album?
The Rush is like a band.
Oh, got it. Okay.
Yeah. And I read a little bit about Stoicism. I'm a part of a couple groups and people talk about it. So I highly recommend, if you're looking for timeless wisdom that can be applied to pretty much anything in life, I highly recommend. And you got into it as well. You know how amazing it is.
Well, I just think the life is hard, the world is hard, business is hard. It comes at you really hard, and unless you have a really strong mindset around it, it will break you into submission. So for me, it's been just a very valuable tool. And also too, Fern, I want to acknowledge you for this. You always are just a very cool, calm, and collected guy, at least from all my experiences of working together. And I would like to think I do think that probably stoic mindset has really served you well, and probably is a big reason that you come off that way, which is very valuable in life. life and business. I wanted to kind of bring that point. But
Yeah.
that all said, my friend, this has been awesome. We still have a little bit of time, but I know don't have the infinite amount with you. So I want to transition here into the lightning round to kind of give your, some parting wisdom to our audience and really big value bombs. So here we go. As we transition, first question is, before all the success that you've achieved today in terms of your entrepreneurial efforts and traveling the world, to your younger self, what do you think, in your estimation, was the one thing that was holding you back to the success that you've now achieved?
I don't consider myself successful yet, because you always have to, and that's another thing that Stoicism brings. You want to, you compare to other people, you are extremely successful, but you're not even near where you were capable of. Right. So I think that, and that's what happens to most people. It's just mindset. It's just getting your mind ready for failure. And to not be afraid of failing. It's very, very difficult when you have a family that you need to feed. That's extremely challenging and daunting. But if you're in the US, you're in a first world country, chances of you starving to death are zero. In other places, it might be a little bit more difficult. So I would just say go for it. It's totally fine to fail as many times as you need to start to succeed. And even in failure, you're succeeding, I think. I love when I fail. I love when I go through something and we try something and then it didn't work. Because then I know that that's something that I've learned. I'm not going to do that, make the mistake again. And it's not even necessarily a mistake. But I love when something doesn't work because then it gives me something else to do. Right, so don't be afraid of failing. Which is very cliche, but
true.
That's what
Next up, you are in the business of giving good marketing coaching, consulting advice. What would you say is the best advice that you've ever received, and why?
Man, there's so many, but one that I think about every day is something that Bader, it wasn't advice, but that's something that Bader says all the time, but it's something that resonates with me a lot, which is action alleviates anxiety, right? So a lot of times you're going to wake up and you're going to think in all these things that you need to do, and I go through this, to be honest with you, on a daily basis, like, oh my gosh, there's that and there's that and there's that and there's that, and there's two things that you need to do is organize yourself. Which is, I tell my kids, like, you're not going to be successful in life if you're not organized. You're not going to be, if your desk is a mess, if you can't find your underwear in the morning, if you lose things and you're not paying attention to those things, your chances of being successful outside maybe artists are very, very slim. So be organized and take action, even if you have to. Sometimes I don't know where I'm going to begin. I just sit here and I start with one thing and the other, and all of a sudden I've done a few things and I'm feeling a lot better. So I think that's the number one problem that people have these days is anxiety. It brings paralysis, and just you doing work, meaningful work towards the things that you need to do will help a lot.
Yeah, that is gold. All right, next up, what would be one personal habit, kind of, and you're talking about being an organized guy, but what would be one personal habit that would you say has contributed to the success that you have, even though to your own words, you don't consider yourself as successful? Curious on that.
It's funny to say that, but I'm a guy, I hate, it's one of the very few things that I talk about that I use the word hate towards. I hate routine. And you know that, like, I hate waking up at the same time every day. I hate that thing of so I really don't have things that I absolutely do every day. I try to block time. I use this amazing app called, I never remember the name, Way of Life, that you put the things that you absolutely need to do every day. And at the end of the day, it reminds you, and you put a check or a no check, right? Did you meditate today? Check or no check? And it gives you an idea of the things that you're doing and what you need to do better. So I try not to have specific times for things. And I totally understand that the business that I'm in and the way I run my life allows me to do that. A lot of people can't. But like I said, I listen to a good piece of music. To me, I resonate with music a lot. So I always try to listen to music that's going to put me in the right mood. And I try to read a little bit. I have another book that I can talk about books in a little bit, but Principles by Ray Dalio. this thing right here is freaking amazing. So they talk about principles about in your personal life and in your business life. I try to pick these books like I'm not a guy. We have family. I can't sit and read for 45 minutes, 1 hour at a time. So I try to just open certain books and read a chapter at a time, and that's something that I do consistently daily.
Yeah. Well, awesome. Speaking of books, and not to lead the witness here, you've shared two incredible ones, Principles by Ray Dalio and then Meditations by Marcus Aurelius. My next question for you is, what would be your favorite book recommendation for our Fitness Franchise Nation and why? So maybe you want to hit those two books, or maybe there's an additional book, but curious on your insights there.
I think that for somebody that's transitioning from having a job to becoming an entrepreneur, the Principles is the book. Like, this is the book that I gift to most people. Like, I've probably bought maybe 30, 40 copies of this book, and I just mail to people. That is the one that can encompass the most things.
Yeah. And for those of you who are not familiar with that book, Ray Dalio, which Fern just mentioned, he's, I think, the most successful hedge fund manager in the world, a billionaire a few times over. So some good wisdom. All right, my friend, that all said, this has been awesome. I still have one question, but before I kind of ask you for your insights and some parting wisdom for our audience, where can our viewers find you at? And I guess I'll tee up also the media team to basically put that graphic on the screen.
Yeah, well, there's 2xwin.com. Funny story too. Like, we've never had a website. We created our website for the first time this year because of the pandemic. We're trying to expand, but we've never. Our team's very small. We can't handle that many people, and especially because of the above and beyond services that we provide.
Right.
So we really don't have a lot of space for people. But we've decided to put up a little website that people can schedule a call to talk to me, totally free of charge, as long as I have the time in my schedule. I can, point you in the right direction. I can give you 3 or 4 things that you can do in your business, marketing wise or not. And I'm available for these calls. You can just book there, and we'll jump on a Zoom call. The only thing to keep in mind is that I'm 8 hours ahead of Pacific. Yeah, I would like to just share that. And for anybody that would like to pick my brain on anything, I love to talk and help people.
Cool. So that's 2xwin.com.
It's 2x-win.com. Yeah.
Perfect. All right. Media, please put that on the screen. So, Fern, man, this has been awesome. I certainly want to acknowledge you. I'll get you in a second. But what would you say would be your last parting words of wisdom to our franchise or fitness franchise audience that will really better their lot in business and also life?
That's really interesting, man. There's so many. And I'm not the guy, like I said, I don't like this cliche things, but this is something that I tell my son. It's to be selfish, not in a sense that people, think of being selfish in a negative way, but be selfish in a way that you need to take care of yourself before you can take care of others. So it's the most unselfish thing you can do. So don't like, for example, if you need 8 hours of sleep, figure out, like, sleep your 8 hours, like, make that a non-negotiable thing. Take care of your family, take care of yourself first, and then try to help others. I see a lot of people, fitness owners, trying to do too many things at once, and then all of a sudden they do that for 3-4 months and then they're burnt out. Mm-hmm. So to avoid the burnout, take care of yourself, be healthy, eat healthy, and be in a good mindset. And then after that, things are going to certainly start to fall into place.
That is gold, my friend. Well, Fern, man, I want to thank you so much. Our audience is super grateful as well for you being on the show. And honestly, I want to take a second to acknowledge you. I was excited for this chat. Just, I consider you a close friend. And I believe the chat even overexceeded my expectations. You're just a wealth of knowledge. You're a very cool, calm, and collected guy. And you certainly have helped a lot of people, a lot of entrepreneurs, a lot of business owners, including me, including our other vice president, especially early in our journeys, but even till this present day. So I have a lot of love and respect for the value that you've provided in my life and many other people's lives as well. And more than that, I acknowledge you for just being an awesome family man, a loving husband, an awesome father. I admire you that for as well. And with all that said, man, thank you so much for being on the show. It's been awesome. And as we say in Brazilian Portuguese, abraço.
Abraço, ciao. Thank you, man. A pleasure being
Thanks.
here. Hey,
Thanks.
and we can come back anytime. You know, like I absolutely loved it. We can talk about other things. If you want me to research a specific thing before we go, we can jump in as well too. So always here for you.
Well, I will take you up on that, my friend. Again, thank you so much, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thanks, man. Bye.